Alexa, what's the temperature outside?
Right now, it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Tonight, expect a low of 67 degrees.
Well,
Happy Thursday.
100 degrees. Let's go for a walk. It's a beautiful 100-degree day here in Denver, Colorado, and a lot of folks right now are training for a fall marathon. And so if you are training for your first marathon, I want to give you some advice. Because when I ran my first marathon, I really messed up. I ran the New York City Marathon, it was my first marathon, and I went into that race as a former collegiate runner. I was pretty cocky. I had gotten a certain amount of success in some other race distances, so I thought that I could transition to the marathon, and I proudly bragged to my faster running friend that I was going to negative split those final couple miles in Central Park over that rolling terrain. I was going to be running 5:45 miles, and that never happened. It was a slow death march to the finish line, and some of my slowest miles happened at the end of that New York City Marathon. I want to help you avoid that and have a much more successful first marathon. Now, the first piece of advice I have for you if you're training for your first marathon is, number one, this is the most important thing, make sure that you are ready for marathon training before you even start. Because I can't tell you how many times I have been working with an athlete who comes to me, they have a marathon on the schedule, it's their first race, and it's 13 weeks away, and they're running 18 miles a week. They're running a 4-mile long run. They are simply not ready to be running a marathon, nevertheless train for one. And so there is a very good reason why there are no couch to marathon programs, because you really can't do that. Marathon training itself is so demanding that you have to be ready for that training. You actually have to train for the training. And to know if you are ready for marathon training, it takes a little bit of work. I have a couple metrics that I use to help runners understand when they're actually ready for marathon training. And the most important thing is the distance of your long run. Are you comfortable running a double-digit long run? If you're comfortable running 10 or 11 miles for your long run, then I think you're probably ready to start a 16 to 18 week marathon training plan. That will give you enough runway, enough time to gradually and safely increase the distance of your long run so that you're not rushing things. Because one of the best indicators of your success in the marathon is your ability to run a lot, to run long distances. And so if you can't run 10 miles comfortably, it's very difficult for you to be able to finish a marathon 16 to 20 weeks from now. So make sure that you've run some other distances first. Train for the 5K, train for the 10K. Better yet, train for a half marathon. I always say, if you can race a half marathon, you're then ready to start your marathon training. So if you are ready to actually start training for that marathon, the next thing to consider is the long run. And not only is it a great way to know if you're ready for marathon training, but the long run is also the most important run that you are gonna do during the entire week of your marathon training. So you've got to prioritize it. I've seen way too many free stock marathon plans that you can download online that have a long run cutback week every other week. So you might run 14 miles and then you cut it back to 10 the next week. And then you go up to 15 miles and then you might cut it back to 12 the next week. And this approach can be fine for other distances for beginners, but for those of us who are training for a marathon, what we are effectively doing is limiting our potential. We are cutting back on the most important run that we're going to do every week. We're cutting back on the most specific run of the week to the marathon. It's going to limit our ability in the marathon. It's going to limit our ability to run fast. And more importantly, for our first-time marathoners, it's going to limit your ability to have a good time. You want to be very well trained for your first marathon, Because if you're not, that first marathon is going to be a struggle. You are going to experience more adversity out there on the race course, and you're not going to have the endurance, the fitness, and the strength to finish that marathon strong. So when you do start training for that marathon, make it a point to run a good long run almost every week. I like to implement maybe a cutback week every 3 to 6 weeks, depending on the athlete, depending on how long the training cycle is, and depending on the ability of that athlete. So just recognize the importance of the long run. Don't follow one of those training plans that leave a lot to be desired, and follow one instead that really prioritizes the most important marathon workout of the week, which is that long run. Now, I know the marathon for many of us is the longest race that we've ever run, that we are ever going to run. But a big mistake is thinking that the marathon doesn't require any speed. Now, even if you are a first-time marathoner, maybe your goal is to simply just finish the race. That doesn't mean that your training is not going to include any speed work. It's actually a really great idea to include a weekly workout as well as regular strides. Not necessarily because these sessions are, going to give you the speed necessary to negative split a marathon, but I think the primary reason why we're going to do speed work while we're marathon training, especially for beginners, is to improve our efficiency, our running economy, to improve our strength, and those physical skills have a lot of carryover into marathon racing itself. So it doesn't have to be crazy. In fact, the workout should really not be too difficult or challenging at all. Instead, think tempo runs, think hill workouts. We don't want to be on the track doing, 5-6 miles of brutal speed work at 5K pace. That's really too hard for marathon training, especially for our newer marathoners. So prioritize a weekly workout. One a week is probably fine. Strides about twice a week, and you're going to be developing that running economy, that nice, fluid, smooth, graceful stride, and that efficiency is really going to come in handy on race day when you're racing 26.2 miles. Man, it is an absolutely beautiful day in Denver. I'm here in City Park. The beautiful lake and the fountain are behind me, but it's also 100 degrees, so I'm going to take a load off here. And let's talk about the fourth big tip for making sure a marathon training for our first race goes off really well, and that's strength training. Now, strength training is such a crucial component of training for runners that by now, I don't even consider it cross-training. It's just part of the training that you have to do to reach your potential as a runner. And that is still absolutely true for first-time marathoners. So if you're training for a marathon, let's not skip out on the strength work. Yes, our main focus has to be running, but the strength training is what's going to keep you healthy. It's going to keep you training well. It's going to keep you progressing. Because after all, when you're training for a marathon, you have to be increasing your mileage. You have to be running longer, long runs, and that is fairly challenging. It is challenging to most weeks run more, to run more frequently, to run longer individual runs. That's stressful on the body, and the way to counteract that stress, to give you those durable muscles, tendons, joints, ligaments, bones even, is through strength training. So really prioritize relatively heavy weightlifting in the gym, but I'm also a huge fan of body weight strength routines that you can do almost anywhere. So you can do a lot of 10, 15, 20-minute strength routines, and we have a ton on the Strength Running site. If you just search strength exercises on the Strength Running site, you'll come up with a bunch of different routines that you can just plug right into your training, and it's super helpful. But I think strength training is one of those things that is going to allow your marathon training to even happen in the first place. Because if you get hurt, you can't line up on race day. So get strong, improve your running economy as well with strength training, and you're just gonna have a better marathon because of that. Now, when it's race day, the number one thing that you have to do is to not start too fast. Now, I've made this mistake too, as someone who's run a bunch of marathons, someone who knew the importance of starting a little bit more conservatively. And when I ran the Boston Marathon, I really messed this up. And so You don't want to start too fast. And I like to say that, if you're someone who is trying to bank time in a marathon, well, you're going to have to withdraw that time later in the race, and there's going to be interest payments. You are going to slow down if you start too fast, thinking that you can get ahead of your average pace and then maybe just hang on for dear life at the end of the race. That might be possible for a very competitive runner. It might be possible for a more seasoned marathoner who has more experience, because after mile 20, it's like the Wild West in the marathon. Anything can happen. And for first-time marathoners, you don't have any experience with the final 10K. It is a very, very uniquely challenging point in any race. It is essentially the time where your body has run out of fuel and you are just really hoping to pull any amount of carbohydrate from your muscles, from your blood, and use that carbohydrate for energy. That's why we carb load before the marathon. That's why we take gels or other fuel during the marathon. And that's what makes the marathon so uniquely challenging. And if you want to have a strong finish, that really starts at the start of the race. Go out a little bit more conservatively. Try to run as evenly as possible throughout the race. And if you are feeling okay over the final 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, then, and only then, can you start picking up the pace and run a little bit faster. I really hope this was helpful for all you first-time marathoners, and even for maybe those folks who have run a couple marathons, but maybe just haven't really run the race that they think they can run. Maybe you haven't really run a strong race. You've made a couple training errors or pacing mistakes on the course on race day. And so as you're preparing for your next marathon, I hope this is helpful in terms of knowing what to prioritize, what to really focus on, and also what not to focus on. So if you want any extra help, definitely check out the Strength Running podcast. We've published more than 200 episodes now. Thank you so much to all of our subscribers. And we have a lot of different episodes about marathon training, both for beginners and also case studies on elite runners who will talk a little bit more about how they prepare for 26.2 miles. And if you do want my help more directly, go to strengthrunning.com/coaching. We have lots of different training programs that include marathon training plans. So you can get exactly what to do on a daily basis, the strength training that's included, pace suggestions, all that great stuff. And if you are getting ready for that first go at 26.2 miles, enjoy the process. It is so rewarding, it is so fun, and have a blast on race day.